It turns out the minister's father sold $1.5 million worth of shares just 4 days before the tax announcement that dropped Morneau-Chappelle share prices. Wow. Is that just a coincidence?
Easy rule of thumb for Canadians watching the goings-on in this House of Commons is to see whether or not the allegations made inside this House are repeated outside this House. As the Conservative House Leader herself said last night, they don't want to get sued.
So let's take this outside. Isn't that what people say before a bar brawl or something? But this was actually inside the House of Commons today, where question period was testy today, but all week, all over more accusations and allegations against Finance Minister Bill Morneau. This time, allegations of, the opposition says, insider trading. And this time, critics are calling for his resignation. Good thing the women of that issue are here to talk about it. Morneau and other things. Tonight, Marie Vestel, parliamentary correspondent for Le Devoir here in Ottawa. Jennifer Ditchburn of Policy Options, also in Ottawa, and Shachi Kurl, Executive Director of the Angus Reid Institute. She's in Toronto tonight. Good to see everybody. Shachi, let me start with you. Do you think we are at any sort of critical mass here in terms of how much damage the opposition is doing to Bill Morneau or damage he may be doing to himself?
Well, that's the issue, Rosie. He's already the most recognized member of cabinet. Canadians have the most awareness of him over and above every other minister. And it's not because they perceive him to be doing a great job. You combine that with the fact that he's had not the best week. He managed to knock this government off its message, off its agenda around the apology to LGBTQ2 Canadians. And there is this cloud that just continues to follow him everywhere he goes. You have to wonder now if Justin Trudeau isn't having his sort of moment a la King Henry II, where he's thinking about his Archbishop of Canterbury going, well, who will rid me of this troublesome minister? I think at this stage, the only thing that the Liberals really have a lot of control over is not if Bill Morneau ultimately goes, but when.
Really?
I feel like they need to order some posters for every politician on the Hill, and one of them will say, perception of wrongdoing can be as bad, and the other one would say, full transparency and disclosure is always the best bet. There's some rudimentary mistakes, I think, that they made along the way. One is underestimating how public opinion can form about things, even if you really didn't do what people said that you did. I mean, we've seen so many examples of this, right? Perception is really important. But the second part is just put it all out there. I mean, don't talk to a couple of columnists. Get all the files, do all the research, put all the data out there and say, look, here's all the stuff. Take a look at it. You'll see we didn't do anything wrong. Where's the story after that? But instead, you've got this like drip, 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 drip. I mean, I guess because this is what we do for a living, but really transparency is usually the best way to kill the story.
Well, and that's a really good point, Marie, because I don't think the opposition has actually proven anything at all. They're just insinuating things. But as Jen points out, maybe that's enough.
Yeah, and I agree with Jen, not only in this file, but for 2 years with this government, often when they're in trouble, they just don't say what's going on, and they kind of just let the story percolate for weeks and weeks. In this case, it is odd that some information is out, other information is not. Bill Morneau's office saying, well, we don't have the date of when these shares were sold, but I assume that you can ask your financial advisor when that transaction was made. It's all a bit odd. And Jen is right. It doesn't necessarily matter if what you are alleged to have done is true. It matters that people read the headline in the morning and your name is associated with wrongdoing. But again, I mean, this is basically their own wrongdoing. At a certain point, you have to take responsibility for the fact that you made a decision or you were given bad advice, not to just put your assets in a blind trust from the beginning. And that first initial decision, it is what has made Bill Morneau's past few months so difficult.
Shachi, last word to you there.
You might also want to play offense if you're this Liberal government and not defense. And certainly the Conservative file on perceived crimes and misdemeanors is thick and it's fat, perhaps thicker and faster because this government hasn't been around as long. And so why aren't we seeing a little bit more attack from this government? That would be my question.
Yeah, and I've always wondered, too, why they let Bill Morneau answer everything, twist in the wind a little bit. Why are they not putting a sort of a pit bull up to defend him a little bit? Okay, I want to change topics to...
I mean, you can make the argument that he's being accountable and taking responsibility, but he should be proactive, like Shachi
go all the
said,
way.
and go offense and not just repeat the same line all the time and not answer.
Okay, I'm going to change the topic to the couple of apologies that the Prime Minister's done over the past week or so. I'll play this clip and then we'll talk about it.
We are sorry for the misguided belief that Indigenous children could only be properly provided for, cared for, or educated if they were separated from the influence of their families, traditions, and cultures. We have failed LGBTQ2 communities and individuals time and time again.
Jen, I'll start with you. I don't think anyone would argue with the apologies, but I wonder about the impact of the apologies, and then the question about what comes next. You've made the symbolic gesture, but what are you actually trying to repair?
So there's a lot of context is important, right?
Sure.
Well, first of all, when you make an apology, you have to acknowledge the facts and you have to take full responsibility. And actually, the UN talks about this when it talks about making reparations for war crimes. It has a description of a real apology looks like. So I think you could argue in both the cases that you showed that there was an acknowledgement of the facts and a full taking of responsibility. What's trickier, though, is whether you go beyond just the symbolism of the apology and you actually take real change to change the system. I think in this case, it's probably a little bit more straightforward with the LGBTQ2 issue. But I mean, look, with the apology to Indigenous people for the residential school system, there we're talking about a whole-scale change in how our system and our government approaches Indigenous peoples. And I think of Taiage Alfred from the University of Victoria, who talks about how we need to change, fundamentally change our colonial mentality, how we view Indigenous people as a problem to be solved. And so an apology only goes so far in terms of changing the outlook and the outcomes for Indigenous people in Canada. It's a whole paradigm that has to change.
For sure. And Shachi, are these kinds of apologies targeting just those slices of people that have been wronged, or is there a broader appeal to Canadians to see their government recognize and take responsibility for something?
It's really a question of risk. And so if you're a government, number one, you're motivated by wanting to do the right thing, but you're also motivated by where does the political risk come in? And frankly, often the greater risk is in being seen to be on the wrong side of the moment or on the wrong side of history. So, you know, generally apologies aren't necessarily vote grabbers, but they can be vote takers if they're not done, or if they're not done well or sincerely. And at the same time, you know, not to be totally crass about it, they're incredibly validating, healing, valuable for the people and the generations that are affected by these wrongdoings. The bigger question, though, and this is where you do tend to hear a little bit of pushback, is from some corners where people say, well, this apology, what's next, who's next? And of course, the caveat or the other side to this coin is there really isn't necessarily an end. You can't draw a line past a certain point and say, well, we're not going to apologize anymore, because guess what? Values and sense of right and wrong and mores change over time. What people were doing 100 years ago seemed very normal and acceptable, and in fact, to many people, the right thing at the time. So we don't know what we're going to be apologizing for in 50 or 100 years.
Okay, Maria, got about a minute left for you.
Well, I agree, but I think that reflection is starting to be made. This is not a new phenomenon to have national apologies in the House of Commons that come with settlements. It all started under Brian Mulroney, and then every Prime Minister after that has done so. I think, though, for certain circumstances, perhaps Justin Trudeau has just made a few apologies in a row, and you do already see that in some media or in some chatter of people who are starting to wonder, is it too much? Is it enough? And the line could be drawn as at if these people are still affected today by the wrongs that were done to them. But I think you need to also be careful about the people who are not concerned by the apology, people who might start wondering, when is it going to end? People who might think you don't necessarily need to rewrite your entire history because, as Shachi said, some things were done 100 years ago because that's the way things were at that time. And some historians argue that maybe you can't erase your entire history. It's part of your history.
Well, I mean, we should say we're not talking about 100 years ago here. We're talking about things that happened in our own history, and in some cases since we've been alive.
Yes.
And yeah, I would.
But some of these things were a long time ago.
Right, but the LGBT stuff, I mean, the military didn't allow openly gay people until 1992.
And
okay,
the apologies are possible today because time and opinion has changed and shifted. Sorry, Rosie.
Okay, that's all right, ladies. I got to leave it there. Thank you, Jen, Chachi, and Marie. Thanks, everybody.